Alright, so next part of the build is to install the oil pump gasket and the oil pump. As you can see, I'm using the upgraded available pump gasket that is available at Minisport. You can check it out on my channel, all the reviews I've done, and check it out in the link in the description. So that'll go in there. This just needs to go in dry, so you don't need to fit any lubricant or oil or anything to it. It'll literally just go in dry. So we want to make sure that we line it up with the 3 bolt holes. There's 2 at the bottom and then 1 at the top. Now, also before you install an oil pump, make sure you check the tolerances as well. Check out the video on my mate's channel on how to do that. Beforehand, make sure you either prime it with oil, so pull it apart and check it, and then prime it with oil or Vaseline like I generally do, or you can just pump some in here, spin it around until it's pumped it all the way through. That'll just ensure that it primes the pump and is ready to go the minute that you turn it. Also, running this gasket is also going to help with priming the pump a little bit sooner, but it's also advised that when you start an engine for the very first time, leave the spark plugs out, crank it over until you get oil pressure on a gauge, and then reconnect everything and then start it up. Never fire up an engine that is completely dry. Also, before you install it, make sure that the keyway lines up with the slot on the back of the camshaft. Now, this one says tappets need to be set to 12 thou. All right, so 3 bolts. Once again, start them by hand. Never use a power tool to start them in case you damage any threads. Now, as you can see behind me on the bench as well, I've also moved the Morris out of the garage simply because it's currently out getting painted. So depending when you're watching this, it is currently getting painted and won't be back for a good couple of weeks. So we're just going to continue on doing the build whilst that's getting painted at the moment. Once we get the engine and the rest of the gearbox sorted, we should be right to pretty much skip forward and start the reassembly process. All right, grab your torque wrench, and in our case, we're going to tighten these up to 9 foot-pounds, so not a great deal of torque. We're just going to go around, double check them all once we've tightened them, and then go and mark them to show that we've done it, and we've known, both audibly, via video, and with a marking, that we've actually tightened them. All right, so before I mark them, I'm just going to give the bolts a bit of a wipe. That way they've got no oil or debris on there, and it's not going to come off as soon as we apply the texture. There we go. All right, so now the oil pump's done, we're going to install the rear sandwich plate. Once we've done that, we're going to call the episode, then we're going to work on the front of the engine in the next episode. All right, so we got our rear upgraded timing plate, and we have the little cup as well. So that needs to get fitted inside there before we go any further. Now that's what seals it, because there is a little hole down under here. So obviously this entire chamber on the outside here is lubricated and then is sealed by the gasket that goes on the inside of here. So this one sits directly up there, just like that. Now, there is a gasket that goes between this rear plate and the housing. So what we need to do is 2 things. 1, we need to install the gasket, and 2, we need to work out which bolts are actually holding this on and aren't going to limit us to tightening up the bell housing bolts when we go to reinstall the gearbox, but also torque all these bolts to the specified torque setting. So just by looking at this, having it pre-fitted, you can see all the bolts around the outside here, which will likely go on through the bell housing, and then the ones on the inside here are the ones that we need to actually tighten up. So we're going to grab our bolts, we're going to grab the gasket, we're going to fit it in behind there, and then we're going to tighten it all down, and then we should be right to torque it all up, call the episode, and then start moving on. All right, so we have our gasket, and it sits directly up there, just like that. So what I'm actually going to do is install all the bolts that hold all of these on, and then when we go to reinstall the gearbox later, I'm just going to remove the ones that we don't need when we line it up. That way I know exactly which ones are actually designed to hold this gasket on in place and which ones are designed for the bell housing. So now we're aware which way it goes and how it's going to be sealing. What we're going to be doing is getting this sealant, which is the aviation foam gasket, and we're just going to be running it around the outside of it. Now, because you're not going to see it, it's not going to be too detrimental that you make this thing absolutely perfect, but try and get it as good as you can. Any excess, make sure you wipe it off when you're finished. So I'm just going to wipe this all the way around the outside. Yes, it's not super pretty, and I'm sure there's people at home saying you should probably do it a different way and it's not right, blah, blah, blah. I know, but you know, each their own. Essentially, I'm just going to run it around the outsides where I know the gasket goes, and then we can come back and clean it up with a bit of brake cleaner or even a bit of wax and grease remover. All right, now the gasket sealer is on. I'm going to reinstall this. a line up there, and it's also got a dowel down here as well. So as I said, it doesn't matter that it's not absolutely perfect. It's not going to be the end of the world. It's got a little bit of excess. We can always come back and clean it up. Now we're going to do the same thing again and just cover this entire surface in sealant anywhere where the gasket surface is. All right, now we have it on there. We can then go and reinstall the sandwich plate. So just line it up nice and carefully. Now this is an upgraded sandwich plate. You don't have to run this one. We decided to run this one simply because we are upgrading the engine, and it's going to cause more stress with a standard flex plate being on there. So we decided to upgrade to give it something with a little bit more rigidity. All right, so once you've got all the bolts in, we're then just going to tighten them up to 28 foot-pound. Now, once you've tightened them once, we're going to go back over and re-tension them. This time, we're going to use the micron on them after we tension them. All right, well, that's it for this episode. Hope you guys learned something on how to install camshaft and oil pump and the rear timing case on a Morris Minor. So this is a pretty simple and straightforward method. Make sure as well, when you go to install the oil pump, you always pull it apart regardless of how new it is, whether it's been built straight from the factory, whether it's been sitting in a box for 15 years. Always check the oil pump clearances like in the video listed above on my good mate AC Dodd's channel. Guys, there's plenty more to come. Next episode, we're going to put the flywheel on, the clutch assembly, and probably mount the gearbox before moving to the front side of the engine to do all of the timing and the rocker gear at the top. So, like always, guys, stay COVID safe. I'll see you right here on another episode of Tomo's Tune-Ups.